The following is a quarantine recording presented to you in around sound. It was recorded with whatever was lying around.
Lady don't take no shit, insist on respect the sister, walk around like a womanish. She won't speak unless it's something worth saying, don't play. The girl take herself so seriously, people stare curiously. She got a natural way, her hips sway furiously. Yeah, the luxuriously, carries herself like the cutest, most prettiest thing you see this side of the bay.
Hey, this is Lady Don't Take No, your weekly roundup of all of the real and none of the fake. I'm your host, Alicia Garza. This show is pro-Black, pro-queer, proudly feminist, and pro-do-what-you-like. Every week, you're going to get the best of what goes on in my head, what we're loving on and what we're hating on, what we might be and what we ain't gonna do. Politics, pop culture, how a good red lip can get you all the way together in the morning, we cover it all. We are recording from Oakland, California, the center of the known universe, where we are dealing with Rona and rebellion. It's a challenging time, a changing time, a time of transformation. It's all the things all the time nowadays, but we are going to help you understand the dynamics of this time every single week. So be sure to tune in, tell a friend, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We do it for the culture, so the pod is free 99, because we know that with a country in chaos, the least we could do is keep you from putting your money anywhere else than where it's needed.
She got a razor sharp wit and she just won't quit. Flaunting it, body built like a house made out of brick. She got the smile, the style, and finesse, compounded with the blessed profound intellect.
I gotta say that the last 4 weeks have felt like I have lived 40 years. We are definitely in the thick of it. And so for the sake of destigmatizing, asking for help, and letting someone support you, I want to say that last week, I started seeing a somatic practitioner, and it's pretty much everything I needed in my life. I've started dealing with anxiety, a completely new and fully undesirable emotion for me. And instead of medicating it to death, I decided to just go ahead and jump all the way into the feelings bath so that I can work my way through it. My sis reminded me a couple weeks ago that we are resourceful and we have resources that we didn't really have the last time around. And so, dear ones, I wanted to share that with you at the top of this pod because shit is real in the field. And if we don't take care of ourselves, it's mighty hard for us to show up to care for one another.
It's all right now. I look right in your eyes. How'd you get so neat?
This leads me to my next guest, who is all about resilience and resourcefulness. Our guest this week is a writer, activist, and facilitator whose TED Talk has been viewed more than 2 million times. That's right, I said 2 million, but let's make it 2 zillion, shall we? She is also a senior fellow of the Economic Security Project, the co-founding director of Family Story, and the vice president of the Family Independence Initiative. Her new book, How We Show Up, Reclaiming Family, Friendship, and Community, was just published this month, and we're excited to have her on the pod. Let's give a warm Lady Don't Take No introduction to Nia Birdsong. Welcome, Nia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a joy. It's a joy. I'm so excited. We got things to discuss.
Yes, we do.
So I got to ask, what has your quarantine life been like? And have you developed any unique habits, live and direct, from Miss Rona?
So I think I'm doing a lot of the things that other folks are doing. I have made sourdough bread.
Oh, yes. Can I get some tips, though?
Yes, totally.
I can't get this started.
I just learned, but I'm happy to give you advice anyway.
Please share the love, because I love me some bread, but I apparently can't make it.
Even mediocre homemade bread is pretty good.
I'm with it.
I've also been, I gardened before, but I'm doubling down on my garden stuff. I got
What's in your garden?
Oh, wow. Okay, I've got lots of kale. When right before sheltering in place started in California, or in the Bay Area specifically, I was my apocalypse sensors started tingling, and I was like, our food system is not gonna. I'm not assuming that's gonna work. So I put food in. So I put in kale and collards. So we have a lot of kale and collards. Ooh. We've got all kinds of lettuces. We got Mizuna. We got romaine. Ooh. We got mustard greens. We got parsley.
What? Yes.
Peas.
Hey.
Tomatoes are coming in. Cucumbers.
Listen. Wow.
Like all this. I planted beans. I planted the kind of beans that you then have to dry and like make soup from.
Yeah, because them beans be spreading too. You know,
yes.
Beans.
I feel like I'll probably have like, one pot of soup worth of beans, but I want to know that I can do it.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this. Do you have you developed any guilty pleasures during the Rona?
Well, I'm not someone who generally feels guilt about pleasure.
Fair.
And frankly, I don't feel guilty about much of anything.
Fair.
The pleasures that I have were ones I was doing before this, and I just feel like I'm insistent on them now. So it's like the evening binging of whatever Netflix situation with my husband. I do a lot of my gardening in the middle of the day. So I like stop working and go out in the garden and just like, this garden that I have is almost 10 years old now. Ooh. And there are all of these beautiful flowers. So sometimes I just go and sit and look at all of that and just like be, not in the rest of the world, but be in my like little container world. That feels good. I masturbate regularly.
Hey, you better come on.
Yes.
I wasn't going to let that one pass. Come through.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm also having sex with another person, but I also just feel like sometimes I'm just like, let me take care of this myself in my own way, in my own time. Again, like, in the middle of the day.
The pleasure is quite literally mine.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then just like I'm eating, I'm like making things that are like deeply delicious to me. I'm definitely not a food as fuel person. I'm a food as pleasure person. So that feels really important right now.
Okay, give me what's the last thing you made that just gave you immense pleasure?
Oh, well, so for Father's Day, I made this pork loin.
You know what? Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Was there fruit involved?
There was no fruit, but there was a citrus ponzu situation, like soy sauce ponzu thing, yogurt. I'd marinated it, and I feel like I actually only discovered in the last like year and a half marinating meat.
I'm trying dry rubs. I'm a little bit obsessed with dry rubs now, but I need your recipe. The citrus ponzu thing is sounding really good.
I want your what do you feel like are your main ingredients for a dry rub? Like your things you would not do without.
Okay, well you've got to have a nice cayenne. Also, I'm into any kind of cumins. Very delicious.
My favorite spice.
Yes, get you a little Aleppo pepper. I'm also very much into that. Lately, I'm a little bit obsessed with Chinese 5-spice.
Yes. Do you make your own?
I don't. I'm not yet at that level. And also the Rona does not want me to be great. So all the things. Miss Rhoda's like, oh, what, you was trying to do something? Let me show you something. Okay, we're going to have to do like a whole food episode because this is a real thing. I'm so glad I'm finding my food friend here.
Yes.
Mia, you and I we go way back actually to at least 2016 where we got to do a TED Talk together with you, moderating a conversation with Opal and Patrice and myself about Black Lives Matter and the values of that. And I was kind of reminiscent, and I was realizing that, at that time, we were 3 years into Black Lives Matter, right? And it was a little bit like this moment where people were suddenly like, oh, what is that? Yep. And so, we're obviously reliving people being reintroduced, let's say, feeling nice today, being reintroduced to the idea that Black lives need to matter. And they're getting that introduction or reintroduction, as they might say, through really confronting this idea around policing. and whether or not policing keeps us safe. I know that in your background and in your history of activism, you have done a lot of work around abolition.
Yeah.
And so I actually wanted to spend some time talking about this. The last couple of episodes, we've been going back and forth. And frankly, people be like, I think we need to change the message to make police better or transform the police or all the kind of shit that people say. And I actually think people are not confused about defunding the police. They just don't agree and they're afraid to say it. So what I would like to do is ask you to talk a little bit about your perspective on defunding the police, your perspective on that being kind of a mainstream demand in this moment, which as somebody who's done this work for a long time, you know, I don't think we thought that folks across the nation would suddenly be kind of boosting this demand. It's wild.
That and guaranteed income. Like those are two things
I want to talk about that too.
Yes.
So help our listeners understand this, because I think people think, oh, this is, young people who are so idealistic and they're just coming up with this in this moment. But there's like a whole body of work behind this that is decades long. So give us your perspective on this moment and talk to us about what actually does keep us safe.
So first, let me offer some grace to people. I think that for folks who think that the messaging is problematic, I think that those folks have been told that we're not allowed to ask for the things that we really, really want because they think someone else is in charge. And I think this is a problem with a lot of the left. We act as if the right is in charge and we need to compromise with them in some way. We need to meet them. We need to be palatable to them. And I think that is inaccurate. I don't think we need to do that at all. And I'd like us to start thinking about what is it that we really, really want. My introduction to activism was through abolition, which is like jumping into the deep end of the pool and not knowing how to swim. And this was in 1998. I lived in New York. I came to Berkeley and went to the first Critical Resistance conference and got to hear Angela Davis and Ruth Wilson Gilmore and all of these folks talking about a world without prisons, policing, and surveillance. And I was like, I don't know what that is. That sounds bananas to me, and it also sounds right. Because part of what the invitation of abolition is, it's not just about what we don't want, right? It is about examining what safety is, like what it means to have safety and live in a world in which we feel safe, and what the things are that we need for that, right? And we all know what those things are. We all know that we need access to our basic needs. We need food, we need shelter, we need education, we need healthcare, all of those things. We know that when people experience trauma or harm, that they need mental health supports, they need healing, and policing and prisons don't provide any of those things, right? Like none of them, zero of them. So what I was invited into in 1998 is to actually imagine the world that I want to live in and to not think of it as something utopian or unrealistic, but to actually think of it as a possibility. And I'm so grateful that that was my entry point, because as imperfect as my abolition is, right? Like I can definitely feel like I want to punish people. Sometimes, I feel like in my parenting, I can be, a bit of a dictator. So as imperfect as it is in my life, my belief for it, my belief that we actually deserve and are entitled to a world in which we have actual safety and actual well-being is unshakable.
Can we talk about how? I agree with you. I actually think that, well, here's what I know. I know that I have lived in communities most of my adult life where people do not call the police.
Mm-hmm.
And we do not call the police because we understand that calling the police will actually extend the harm and not address the harm. And it's not like the folks who I was living around or living in community with had an abolitionist framework, right? It was just actually like real talk. I know what happens. And I want to tell a quick story to just ask you, and this is not to be like lightning rod at all. And trust me, I've had plenty of lightning rod conversations in the last week. So we can go anywhere you want with this. But my partner and I, when we lived in East Oakland, actually saw a man's face like hacked off, right? Like there was an altercation in the middle of the street. It was late at night. I think folks were turned up. Something was going on. And basically this man got his face hacked off with a machete. We saw the whole thing. We were screaming, trying to intervene. And we had that moment where we were like, what should we do? And the police came. And everybody who was outside trying to figure out, one, how to just provide more visibility so that the attack would stop, but also how to make sure that this person got medical care. As soon as the police showed up, everybody turned around and went inside. And it made me really think about two things. I mean, one, you're right. The attack happened. Unless you could snap your fingers, right, and somebody could magically appear, the harm had already occurred. And now the question was for everybody, are we going to extend that harm by now, there's lots of different avenues this could go, but usually where it goes is, can you identify the person? And then if you can, then you go and get the person. And then the person is either charged or they're not. And that extends a whole lifetime of, somebody's contact with a system. Then there's also the piece about people in community. And certainly there's lots of contradictions in here. People don't speak up for a lot of reasons, including not wanting to face retaliation. And then the third kind of angle of this, right, and probably the most important, is what gets resolved between those two people, if anything. And so I guess I use that story to just say, these are the stories that critics will often use when they say, well, abolition is not possible. And one of the things that I know from being taught by Ruthie Gilmore is, abolition is not just about taking things away. It is also very much about what we build in its place. And I agree with you. I don't think people can imagine, like, well, what would I do in that situation? Can we talk that through? Like, what do real solutions look like that people can feel and touch and see as they are unabashedly imagining the future that they want and that they want for themselves?
So first, I'm so sorry that happened and that you had to see that. That sounds awful.
It was terrible.
And I also want to say that, like, if I could snap my fingers and open all of the prisons and jails in the country, I would do that immediately, like without putting anything in place, because I think we'd figure it out, because the vast majority of people who are locked up right now are not, hacking people's faces off with a machete. So part of what we have to think about is, like, violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. Nobody just grows up with all of the things that they need in their lives and ends up harming other people. We know that violence perpetuates itself. And if we're actually interested in stopping violence, then we need to focus on solutions that don't perpetuate it and that actually reduce harm. And let me say, like, so much of what I feel like I've learned about what to very practically put in place and build outside of a carceral system is the stuff I've learned from people who do transformative justice, and very specifically Mia Mingus, whose feet I get to sit at and ask questions of. And part of what that looks like is really recognizing that both people who experience harm and people who perpetuate harm are in need of some kind of healing when harm happens. And all of us experience harm and all of us perpetuate harm. None of us is, they're not good people and bad people. And in that instance, like, part of what I think about is, what does it look like for the person who was harmed, obviously to get medical care, right? But also to get all of the emotional support, the therapy, the physical therapy, the emotional therapy that they're going to need in order to heal from what happened to them. Mm-hmm. And our mental health systems in this country are awful. Mm-hmm. Policing and prisons do not provide those things. That's what somebody who experiences harm needs. And then for the person who caused the harm, right? Like we need accountability, but accountability does not look like punishment. That's not what accountability is. Accountability and transformative accountability looks like self-reflection. It looks like being in a circle of people where you can build enough trust so that you can actually reckon with the harm that you've caused. It means figuring out what the person who experiences harm wants. Like, what do they need? And listening to that, and this is, from the folks I know who do this work, like it's a long process because people don't have the kind of community they need, but we can build that community. And I feel like one of the things that we should all be doing right now is thinking about, if something bad happened to me, like what circle of people would I pull together to help me heal from whatever harm I experience? And if I were to harm someone else, and I'm talking about everything from like, I was an asshole to a friend of mine to causing like physical violence, who are the people who I could pull together who would help me hold myself accountable? Mm. And I feel like lots of us have the first group, right? We have the people who we go to when something bad happens to us, but not many of us have thought about what it would mean to have a circle of people who we could gather together to help us hold ourselves accountable.
Mm. I love this. I appreciate this because I think this is an invitation for folk to think about two things. One, how do we actually meet needs? And we're taught in this country that there actually isn't enough to go around and that people don't have the things that they need because they don't work hard enough or they don't fight for them enough or, they just aren't imaginative enough to like figure it out. But there's also a reality that we have plenty. In fact, we have most of what we need. It's just not distributed the way that it should be. And that is something that we can change in our lifetimes. And if we did do that, what would that look like? And I say that from my home as I look out the window and I see just half a block from me, there's a man who's living in a tent, right? And he's been there for 3 months.
Yep.
And there is actually plenty. And there is no reason that I should be in a home. And this man is also in a home, but not in a home like the one that I'm in. So we can actually close that gap. I think the second thing that you're really provoking for me is the idea that policing is actually, it is about punishment, and punishment does not actually create accountability, right?
Correct.
So thank you, Mia, and thank you, Mia squared. Thank you, Mia, for giving us this, right? But especially Mia Mingus for giving us these frameworks to think about what does accountability and healing look like. And we can abhor behaviors that have caused harm, but that doesn't change the behavior and it doesn't make it go away, right?
Exactly.
And that actually we have to lean into, and not in a hippy dippy way, in a real ass, like we got to solve a problem way. Mm-hmm. Why did we get here? And what can we do to move through it?
And this is the transformative part of transformative justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is meant not just to address the harm that has happened, but it's meant to make sure that the same harm does not happen again.
Very powerful.
And in order to do that, we really have to people need to grow and change.
I'm here for this. Okay. I'm here for this. I feel like we need an entire episode just on this.
Yes.
And I thank you for indulging me there, because this is something that is driving me bonkers. And so I want to use this platform as an opportunity for people to really dig into some of this, because there's so much at stake right now. And we have this little opening that we can kick open if we're just courageous enough to do so. So your book is out. It's all the things. Give us the scoop. What can people expect when they go and buy this book? And where can they go and buy this book?
So first of all right, well, if you want a signed copy of the book.
Hey, there we go. Come on.
You can only get a signed copy from Marcus Books, which is in Oakland, relatively close to my house. It's the oldest Black bookstore in America. It is a cultural institution. It is an absolute national treasure. You have to call them because they don't have a website. And you can order my book and say you want a signed copy. And then they call me and I go down there with my mask and everything and I sign books. Otherwise, get it from wherever your local bookstore is. What's in there? There's a deconstruction of the American dream, and I tell you why it's garbage and trash and not good for anyone. And then there are these beautiful, amazing stories that were gifted to me through all these interviews that I did with people who talk about how to raise kids and how to navigate hardship and how to think about abolition is in there, how to think about transformative justice, what it means, what accountability really looks like, what redemption is, what the entry point that food and meals are for creating space to navigate conflict and to think about all the ways in which other people help create the things that we need to live.
Yes.
So recognizing the ways in which, like I can sit down and eat my pork loin that I made for Father's Day, and I have to recognize that, someone raised and slaughtered that pig, and someone drove the meat to the grocery store, and someone shelved the meat on the grocery store, and then someone, because I didn't go to the grocery store, someone took it off the shelf and put it in a bag and brought it to my home, and that there is this long line of people that I am connected to, without whom I would not be eating, and that dissolution of all of these boundaries between us feels so important right now.
God. Give me one reflection that you think your book offers us in the time of the Rona.
Yes. So one of the things that was a through line with all of the stories were about our relationship with asking for and receiving help and support. I would say generally, people in America are allergic to asking for help. And part of what I learned from all of these stories, and the way that it's shown up for me now, is that when we don't accept help and support, we are denying ourselves ease. We are also denying the gift that it is to be able to support someone you care about, or denying whoever it is offering the support that. So one of the things that's happened to me in this time, so I have a friend, Sarah, who every time she goes grocery shopping, she texts I think 3 or 4 of us. And she's like, is there anything that you need? And the first time she did that, I was so, I felt myself be resistant to the idea of actually saying yes. But I realized, one, I was out of salt. And I can't cook nothing.
You
no
can't
salt.
cook without salt. That's not what we do.
And, and I'm like, but it's a pain in the ass to go to the grocery store. And then I was like, you know what? She asked. Nobody told her she needed to do that. I'm like, she offered this thing. And in the back of my head, I realized I was working through something. So I said yes. I said, I would like some salt. So she goes to the grocery store. She drops salt off on my porch, and we wave at each other through the window. And I saw how big her smile was and how joyful she felt in doing her whole little, dropping off little things at people's houses. And I was like, oh yes, this is what this is. She needs this as much as I do. The salt is going to I'm going to be able to make whatever I need to make. But it also did something for her that sense of generosity and of being able to provide for somebody who you care about is restorative for us. It is life-giving. So part of this is about recognizing that we are all in this cycle of giving and receiving with the people in our lives, and we ought not interrupt that cycle. So, and then the other place I feel like I'm leaning into is how I offer support and help to other people. So I try not to say, "Let me know if you need anything," because that requires the other person to think of something that they need and then do the calculation around like whether or not they think it's something that I can provide, and then get past their like socialization about like how shameful it is to ask for help, right? Instead, I can say, "Hey, I know that you've been doing a lot of care this week. Can I spend, an hour with your kid on Zoom so you can go take a bath?" And they can just say yes or no, right? If that's not useful, then they can say no to it. But it's specific. I'm very clear about like here's something I can offer. It's leaning into this intuition we have and knowing we have of like who our loved ones are and what would bring them ease. And I think sometimes we feel like we don't want to get in each other's business, but I think this is a time for us to be in each other's business. Also, it builds intimacy. We're in each other's lives in this way. It allows us to know each other in this deeper way. And that for me, and I feel like that's the thing that I feel like I've been getting from this like cycle of like providing loved ones with things I think are useful to them, and then people offering me things that they think are useful to me. And that intimacy and closeness also feels like we need more of that, especially because we can't physically be with each other.
I love that. Mia, yes, yes, thank you. This is exactly what I needed today, and I know it's exactly what our listeners needed as well. And just like that, it's time for our weekly roundup of all the things we just ain't gonna do this week. Number 1. One thing we ain't gonna do is act like wearing a mask is a part of a left-wing conspiracy. Ask the Black baby Jesus why, but there's a lot of conspiracy theories floating around. And the one we just ain't gonna do this week is act like wearing a mask in the middle of a global health crisis with a virus that has killed more than 125,000 people, and a virus that we don't yet have a vaccine for, is some kind of indoctrination into being a liberal. Y'all can fuck around if you want to, but here's the facts for those of us who believe in science. Miss Rona is a bad mamma jamma, and she is taking people out left and right. At this point, I feel like we should just have an opt-out thing, but that means if you opt out, you don't get no ventilator when your ass gets sick. Number 2, things we just ain't gonna do this week. Act like police aren't still out here killing Black people for no goddamn reason. The latest Black person to be killed by police is named Elijah McClain. Elijah was actually murdered in August of 2019 in Aurora, Colorado. Police received a call about a suspicious person and approached McClain to search him to see if he had weapons. McClain struggled initially, saying, "I'm an introvert. Please respect my boundaries that I am speaking." This is all, of course, captured on a body cam worn by officers. The officers can be heard saying he is going for your gun, and they place McClain in a chokehold, his family says, for at least 15 minutes as McClain vomited, begged for them to stop, and told them that he could not breathe. What's the through line here? McClain didn't commit any crime. McClain was placed in a chokehold. Officers already had body cameras, and the body cameras were on. This is a person who played music to animals in animal shelters. What exactly was happening here, and why did it happen to McClain? Well, the answer is because McClain is Black. McClain committed no crime and was only suspected of being suspicious. I know that's a heavy one, but let's talk about the things that we want more of this week. So number one, whatever the hell generation it is that organized on TikTok and direct action spoofed the president, bought up all the tickets to the campaign rally that never should have happened and then didn't show up, which meant the Tulsa, Oklahoma rally, site of horrors that are unfathomable, was a great big nothing burger. Shout out to the generation who is courageous enough to say, enough is enough. One more shout out this week goes out to the Black Organizing Project in Oakland, California, for getting the Oakland Unified School District to divest from punishment and invest in our community. You might know that Oakland is one of the few cities across the country that actually has a police department for schools. This victory redirects $2.5 million from policing in schools and gives it back to students. Please give the Black Organizing Project some love to continue their incredible work. You can do so by visiting blackorganizingproject.org and checking out their resources on our socials. We are out of time, but I loved having you on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Where can the good people who are listening today connect with you on the socials?
I am Mia Birdsong everywhere. So my website is miabirdsong.com. My Twitter is Mia Birdsong. My Instagram is Mia Birdsong. That's it. It's easy.
Well, that's what we're doing. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.
So that's it for Lady Don't Take No. But I'll be back here every single Friday morning to accompany you where you used to have a commute. We appreciate you joining us, and let's keep the conversation going. Tell us what's on your mind. Tell us what you like, and tell us what you just ain't gonna take no more of. On Twitter, we're at Lady Take. On Insta, we're at Lady Don't Take No Pod. We're also on Facebook at Lady Don't Take No Podcast by Alicia Garza. We post ways to do something about the things that you hear about on this show on our social media. So if we got you amped up today, check out the socials to find out how you can take action. Please subscribe and write us a review and let the people know what you've heard here today. Our producer is Phil Circus. Our incredible theme is by Latyrix. This pod is supported by the Black Futures Lab. And I'm your host, Alicia Garza. Remember, stop killing Black people. Organizing gets the goods, and safety is not punishment. It's resilience, and it's building and maintaining community relationships that can get to the root of harm and transform it. That's right. I said it because Lady Don't Take No.
Lady don't take no shit, insist on respect the sister, walk around acting womanish. She won't speak unless it's something worth saying, don't play. The girl take herself so serious, people stare curious, she got a natural way, her hips sway furious, yeah, the luxurious, there is a self.
Love y'all.